Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Frozen Heart, Fated Soul. Episode 5. Chapter 40a. She raked her claws down my back, slicing through my top as pain seared across my back. What a cheater! Was this what they were taught? She chuckled, but I shook my head. 1. I let go of her roughly and stepped away from her. I wished I could see her facial expression, but I couldn't. It disgusts me that this is the level you lowered yourself to, just to win a simple match to check someone's level. I may be a handicapped wolf, or a defective wolf to you, but I worked hard to be the very best version of myself that I'm capable of being. It's disappointing that such a proclaimed warrior, who is complimented in most packs, would resort to such tricks. The rules of a sparring match are common knowledge, but for you to break them, it's pathetic. I turned away. My entire body ached and I still would have to feel for my phone along the wall. I just want a long shower and then my bed. I heard her scoff. You're still a defect, everyone knows that. I decided to ignore her. I wasn't sure why she was so hateful towards me. If it was because of the small issue over dinner that day, then she really had some to deal with. I heard her get up as I reached the wall and began feeling along it, hoping I wasn't too far from my phone. What I wasn't expecting was something to ram into my already painful right foot, making me scream in agony. The sound pierced the air as I fell to my knees, clutching it as the pain took over. My eyes sting with tears of pure anguish. I heard her chuckle. In real life, you'd be dead. There's no such thing as a friendly match. If you duel to win. You lost, whether you think so or not, I said coldly. Unless you want me to humiliate you further, go. She scoffed. Whatever, loser. She spat before walking off. I stayed on the ground, praying the pain eased up. Couldn't I heal myself? The sudden thought made a ripple of curiosity run through me and I closed my eyes in determination, taking a deep breath as I focused. Alejandro, I had just got back from my little escapade. Sometimes I enjoyed dealing with things alone, and as I had predicted, rogues were gathering in clusters. The only problem was they didn't know who the king was, or they just couldn't tell me. The moment they even tried to say something, they ended up dying. I had my men follow some leads. I had left a few survivors, hoping for one of them to meet with someone or other. There were still no solid leads. I had just returned to my pack grounds when I heard the distant scream of pain. My stomach twisted as panic filled me, another emotion that I never experienced. The need to go to her overtook me and I rushed ahead, worry and fear fueling me. Did you hear that scream? I heard one of the warriors on patrol say to her partner. I did, maybe someone training? Oh, Alpha! I didn't stop as I rushed past them in a blur, trying to sniff her out. What had happened to her? I tried to push aside the emotions that were eating me up inside. Whoever hurt her, I'll tear them to shreds. I growled lowly when I finally caught sight of her, her delicious scent of chocolate mixed with something I never wanted to smell on her, her blood. I felt the burning fire of anger blaze within me, taking in her back that was slashed and how she was holding on to the wall in order to walk, her other hand holding her phone with the torch on. She seemed to have sensed me. I knew if anything it was my anger that she could feel. I closed the gap between us in a flash, cupping her face. Kiera! Who did this to you? I growled menacingly. She froze, her heart hammering, and I realized the last time she saw me was when we kissed. What happened, Kiera? I repeated. I needed to know. The desperation to destroy whoever did this to her was threatening to snap all my self-control. She looked as gorgeous as ever, but the clear pain on her face was driving me crazy. She looked up, but she wasn't looking directly into my eyes. I hated the fact that she was out here in the dark when she couldn't see. Where were her guards? Why was she out here alone? It was then that I caught another scent on her, a scent I recognized extremely well. My eyes flashed red and her gorgeous ones finally found mine. Nothing happened, I was sparring. She said. My eyes narrowed. Your entire back is slashed open. Care to explain what kind of sparring that is? I growled dangerously. I hated being lied to. It was just sparring, she muttered, pulled out of my hold. Now get out of my way. I grabbed her arm and spun her around, making her flinch from the tug at her wounds. I felt guilty. Couldn't I even do anything carefully? Let go of me. She growled, her eyes flashing. Don't irritate me. We both know that I know exactly how to shut you up. I said dangerously. She tensed and I didn't miss the scorn on her face. That won't work anymore, she said quietly. I felt my stomach twist as if she had punched me in the gut. I didn't miss how she stayed stiff in my arms rather than lean into me. It sure messed with me. Oh yeah, why not? I asked coldly as I carried her back towards my mansion. I wasn't going to bother with the front door. I had enough of getting confronted by pups. You're engaged. Unlike you, I'm not a whore, she said icily. I smirked. I'm sure if I wanted, I could with her head. But wasn't this what I wanted? One woman is never enough for me. I pity Jasmine, she replied carelessly. I stayed silent when we reached the mansion and stopped at the bottom of my window. I jumped up onto the ledge outside my bedroom, making her gasp. Her nails were digging into my neck as I slid the window open, cradling her with ease in one arm. I felt the tingle from her touch rush through me, her contact with me. If I hadn't done this for years, I may have fallen. I was tempted to give her a scare, just to have her cling to me for a little longer. The moment we stepped inside, she jumped out of my arm as if I burned her. She stumbled as her feet hit the ground, leaning on her left ankle. She reached out to guide herself as she hobbled towards what she thought was my door. Poor girl. I smirked. Carry on that way and you're going to hit the bed soon enough. Let me check your wounds, I said. No thanks, she replied bitterly. Then let me rephrase that. Sit down and let me check or I'll force you, I growled. She scoffed in contempt. That's all you can do, right? Force people, threaten people, use people, cheat people. Should I go on alpha or do you get the hint? I switched the light on and she stopped in her tracks, a foot away from my bed. Turning and glaring at me. Seems like you were heading in the wrong direction. Or was the bed your aim? I said mockingly. She scowled at me, about to walk towards the door when I cut her off, appearing in front of her in a flash. Her heart raced before she turned that venomous, rather glare at me. "Move," she said quietly, and for a moment I saw the hurt in them. Hurt that clawed at my own chest. "Just, let me check the wounds," I said quietly. "You're here under my watch, like you care. If I say no, will you let me go?" she asked. Was she questioning my integrity? Obviously, I wasn't going to listen. "What do you think?" I asked, trying not to let my gaze go below her lips. "I want to believe that you are decent enough to let me leave," she said, trying to sidestep me. I smirked mockingly. "Then you're in for a disappointment." With those words, I spun her around, pushing her stomach down on the bed. "What are you doing?" she shouted, her heart thudding. I placed my knee over her thighs, keeping her on the bed, and bent down, letting my lips graze her ear. Satisfied when her breath hitched. "As much as you sounds tempting. I'm only going to check your wounds," I whispered, inhaling her intoxicating scent. I know I'm meant to stay away from her. But she was hurt. I tore her shredded top off and looked at the deep wounds. My anger was only growing, and the temptation to rip Carmen to pieces grew with it. "I'm going to kill her," I hissed. The urge to leave right now was pushing at me, but I also knew I couldn't leave Kiera like this. "We sparred, leave it. It's between me and her. I can fight my own battles," she said quietly. "This is my pack. If anyone dares, you hurt me a lot more than she did, so just stop this," she snapped, turning her head to look at me. I swallowed, glaring down at her, but said nothing. She tensed as I brushed my finger along the wound's 3 large claw marks, plus the mess that was made of the back of her neck. I clenched my jaw, unable to think straight. I didn't care if they sparred, this was not a normal match. She hurt her, so she'd be punished for this. I will deal with Carmen, and I'll do it myself. I looked down at her wounds, running my hand down her waist absent-mindedly, not realizing what I was doing until she spoke. "Don't do that," she warned quietly. I stopped, trying to fight the urge to kiss her shoulder. Leaning down, I slowly ran my tongue over the first of her wounds. The saliva of an alpha helped heal faster, and this was probably the first time I was doing this. I wasn't sure if it was the same for a Lycan, but there was no harm in trying. The taste of her blood was something else, sweet and deeply rich. I resisted the urge to kiss her in the process, feeling her body tremble slightly under me. I was glad she couldn't see me because this was making me throb. "You don't need to do that," she said curtly. "What's wrong? Getting turned on?" I remarked tauntingly, now placing one hand on her head to keep her down as she struggled against me. I smirked as I smelt the very faint scent of her intoxicating arousal hit me. It seemed like she was fighting herself. Stubborn, wasn't she? "Not at all," she hissed. "Your body is saying something else," I murmured. "It isn't," she said coldly. "Go your fiancé. Whether Jasmine and I get married or not, it doesn't mean I'll be tied to her. She knows that I can do who I want," I said icily. "I'm not a homewrecker who would ever with a taken man," she said quietly, now forcing her head to turn and look at me, her eyes blazing a brilliant violet. I didn't reply. What did I want anyway? To keep her in the shadows as my mistress? She was worth way more than that. I was a mess. She gave me a hateful glare. Well, if she wanted to play high and mighty, I'll show her how it was done. I finished tracing her injuries with my tongue, wishing I could go lower and taste something else too. I appreciated her for a second before I moved off of her completely. She pulled away roughly and gave me a dirty look. Nothing I've not seen more, I said mockingly. From today on, just don't show me your face. I don't need you to ruin my reputation, she said icily. Seems like attraction changed to hate quickly. Not that I should care, everyone hates me and I don't give a tone. Well, you have nothing to worry about then, 'cause you don't really have anything I would want to come back for. I'm done with you anyway, I said harshly, smirking in victory at the way she froze at my words. You wanna play? Then let's play. Kiera, I hadn't been able to heal myself, although I had tried. I knew I was doing the right thing, I was doing it exactly the same way I had when healing Valentine, but it seems maybe it's just not meant to work on me, or that I need to practice a little more. I had got up and began walking back to the mansion slowly. Goddess, did it hurt? Alejandro gave me hot and cold signals. I wanted to hate him, but then a part of me wanted to believe he cared. Even a little. But now as Alejandro just shot that painful remark at me, I wasn't sure if I should get annoyed off or just laugh. He's the one who couldn't keep his hands off me. Yes, he looked absolutely delicious in only those oversized basketball shorts that hung so low on his hips. It was a mission not to lick my lips, but I dared not run my eyes over his torso, nor admire his tattoos and the necklaces he always seemed to wear. His earring that hung in his right ear glinted when he moved his head slightly, watching me sharply. Maybe it was a both-way thing? I shook my head. Really? I said, coming back to reality, now remembering his mocking comment. I moved a brow arrogantly, doing my very best version of Dad's face, a look I have practiced many times in the mirror growing up. I smirked, scoffing lightly as I looked him up and down. He narrowed his eyes at me and I simply rolled mine. Funny way to show it, you're the one who can't keep your hands off me. I mean, I don't see me going up to you and trying to kiss or flirt with you, I remarked in the most mocking tone I could muster. Goddess, how did these alphas do it? Arrogance was not in my bones. Keep acting delusional, now get out. He growled, his jaw clenched. I resisted a giggle. Haha, I had annoyed him off. Now feeling rather smug, I stepped closer to him. I assure you, Alpha, if I wanted to, I'd have you hard in no time, I said softly, letting my gaze fall to the front of his pants. He smirked, and for a moment I faltered. Was this smart? I was confident, but that arrogant smirk was throwing me off. I stopped in my tracks. I was not going to let him mess with my head. Not this time. But I'm not even interested in you, I said coldly. Yeah, anyone with can turn me on. I've already had one taste of you and I'm kinda bored, he mocked. Wow, you just kind of admitted you're a disgusting dog. He smirked coldly, I had to admit I was shocked he didn't get angry at that remark. Oh yeah? Then it seems you enjoyed this dog. I made you scream louder than that back at your pack. We both know you tried to keep your volume down but couldn't manage. Ugh. How did he just do this? So annoying. I simply glared at him before becoming serious. How could you do that to Rayhan when he was simply looking out for me? How I wish I actually listened to him. His smirk vanished the moment I changed the topic and his aura only seemed to grow. That's none of your business. He growled. He should learn not to get involved in my business. Make up whatever excuses you want, you had no right to hurt him like that. I snapped. His eyes flashed and I saw him advance, grabbing me by the neck. I didn't even flinch. The belief, or call it madness, that I didn't think he'd hurt me was something I felt with complete confidence. I tried to ignore his intoxicating scent that made me want to close my eyes and give in to all his darkness and rage. I had to focus. I met his gaze as he glared down at me, rage and fury seeping off him. Side with him as much as you want, but I warned him to keep his mouth shut. He hissed. I was about to reply when I wondered what Rayhan had said that had riled him up. Was there more to it? Did he say something he shouldn't have? I asked quietly. I watched him curiously, not missing the sound of his heart skipping a beat, but he kept his dark, cold glare in place. Him just talking was enough. Liar. He had said something that had triggered Alejandro off, I was sure of it. His eyes returned to his usually dark ones and I knew he was confused at my silence. Even though he held me by my throat, there was no pain or danger oozing off of him. Sometimes it's okay to talk, I said quietly. Don't play the shrink. Get out. He said, letting go of me. He turned his back on me and I felt the pull at my heartstrings. His broad, muscular back, his tattoos, the arrogance and darkness that surrounded him, what about the soul hidden within? The one that was so isolated, no one was able to breach the barriers that kept it locked away from the world. Too far for anyone to pull to the surface. One thing I realized was, the Lycan king was far lonelier than he'd ever realize or let on. I turned to leave when I paused. I don't know what overcame me but the urge to do something was too strong. I reached out, taking his large calloused hand in my slender one, trying not to flinch at the pain that still lingered from the silver. He stiffened, turning sharply as I gave his hand a gentle squeeze. I don't mind being a friend, if you ever need one. I said quietly, looking into his dark seductive eyes for a second. Our eyes locked and for a moment I felt that strong pull. Our hearts raced and I wondered what this was. It was scary, how he had this hold over me, yet so tempting. No, I could never see this man as a friend, when my heart went wild in his mere presence. The way his gaze alone made my stomach knot and my core throb. But if he ever needed me in that way, I'd be there for him. I didn't wait for a reply, letting go of his hand and limping to the door. Making sure not to turn back, even when I felt his intense gaze watching me. I had changed but hadn't bathed, letting Alejandro's saliva do its job. I won't lie, the way I had felt when he ran his tongue up me had sent me to cloud 9 and I had to quickly think about the old male wolves back home. It was the only thing that had stopped me from melting into his touch and getting turned on. I was proud of myself. That was my new plan. Next time he tries to tempt me, I will just picture those old men and I'll never get turned on again. Smart of me, I thought smugly. I put on a loose, clingy, thin shirt and some panties. After a quick wipe down with a damp towel, I decided I'd bathe in the morning. I returned to the bedroom and opened the window, leaving a small gap so the wind could blow in. It was rather warm tonight, but the breeze was cool. The sounds of animals awake at night filled my ears along with the pleasant chirping of crickets. The very sounds that felt like music to my ears. Turning the light off, I dimmed the touch lamp and lay on my stomach gingerly. Goddess, I was annoyed at that stupid. How could she do that? However, I was also proud I had fared pretty well against her. I was drifting off when I heard talking from outside. I frowned but didn't move. My entire back was burning up slightly and I didn't want to be heard. Who was outside at this time? I reached for my phone to check the time. 1:49 am. I closed my eyes, honing in on the voices. Alejandro, and the other voice sounded familiar too. It took me a moment to click who it was, and I almost jumped out of bed. Auntie Indy. At all. She was saying. At least there was some progress. How come he didn't come himself to report this? Alejandro's voice came. The man has made me hornier than I've ever been. I groaned inwardly. Note to self, never approach Alejandro when I'm half asleep. I'd probably lose all of my common sense. He was tired and I'm pretty energized. Indigo said. You know, you can talk to me if anything's bothering you. He said quietly, his voice was barely audible, so much so that I wondered if I'd misheard him. Was the arrogant mean alpha was being considerate? I know. Nothing is bothering me, Alpha. She said. Then you should take care of yourself. He replied curtly. An odd feeling of curiosity began eating up at me. Why was he being so nice? Well, it was nice for him to be anyway. Was it the nicest he's ever been towards anyone maybe? Of course, Alpha. She said. Is she here? Your niece? Yes, she is, as irritating as her father and stubborn like her mother. He said. Yeah, and you still wanted a piece of me. I made a face. She's reckless, headstrong, and one of the sweetest souls I know. Indigo replied, thank you, Auntie, for reminding him how nice I am. Dumb big bad Alpha. I'm presuming now that you're here, you'll take her and the brat with you tomorrow. I'll ask Frederick. He just got back, I don't want him to get overwhelmed. It might be better that they stay here. I felt a pang of disappointment at that. Didn't Auntie want us? That didn't make sense. She loved our girly sleepovers whenever she visited. Don't blame him, I don't blame you for not wanting them. Alejandro's reply came. This guy. I heard Auntie laugh. Now I pouted displeased, he even made a woman laugh? Why haven't I seen this side of him? Nice to know you have welcomed them in. Good night, Alpha, I'll be heading back. Don't mistake anything for kindness, and I mean it, you need to take it easy. Okay, she replied, seemingly pretty confused too. She seemed to have walked off and I sat up frowning. Why did Auntie Indy say she didn't want us? It was a little strange, but then again, we didn't really know her mate or see him often. Maybe he was just like his dummy alpha. A shadow fell over me and my heart thumped as I leapt from the bed, stumbling and falling in the process as I spun around to look at the figure that now stood behind my bed. It's rude to eavesdrop. Kiera, I placed a hand to my heart, taking a deep breath. Seriously, have you not heard of knocking? I growled, getting to my feet and praying the thin, clingy fabric of my shirt didn't reveal too much. Fat chance, his eyes were already roaming over me. I yanked on the hem, hoping to cover my underwear, only to notice his eyes flashing red as they focused on me. Didn't he say he was done and dusted with me? My stomach fluttered and I slowly made my way back to my bed and sat down, crossing my arms expertly over my chest. Care to share why the almighty Alpha King graced my humble abode with his presence? I asked mockingly, glad he was at least wearing clothes now. To tell you, that whatever you heard is not to be mentioned to anyone. He said seriously. I frowned, curiosity igniting within me. Should I say I don't know what he's on about? Should I dig a little deeper? I don't know about that, I mean it's some pretty serious information. If it was so important, why didn't you stop talking when you knew I was awake? I said, smoothly. He glared at me. I didn't realize you were awake. He growled dangerously. Now that's a order. On one condition. I said, keeping my eyes firmly on his. Who do you think you are to put conditions forth? He said coldly. Then I won't promise to keep my mouth shut. I countered confidently. This is a serious lead, Kiera. One I've been going after for years. There's a high chance that Galloway Forest may contain the answers. I don't trust many people, I can't deal with another leak. He said quietly. I felt my blood run cold, the name was ordinary and one I knew. Being the largest forest in the United Kingdom. But why did I feel there was something off? Woman! Don't ignore me! He growled dangerously. I looked up at him. No. I'm not ignoring you. There's something there. You should stay away from it. I have a bad feeling. I said, now rubbing my arms, trying to get rid of the goosebumps that had settled there. Also trying not to flinch at the marks the silver blade had left. What do you mean? He asked, now frowning. I don't know. I just have a feeling. I shrugged. Now can I sleep? He looked at me, his frown partially gone and I wished it wasn't. He messed with my mind and body so easily. Callum told me about your abilities. There are chances you have other abilities aside from healing. He said. You mean like my sixth sense that often comes true? I asked. Maybe. I won't believe in that unless I see it for myself. He said. I gave him a glare but said nothing. Everyone back home thought it was just intuition, but I knew Liam also had that sense too. Maybe it wasn't the same thing. Have you told your parents? No, I said, thinking there was a lot I hadn't told them. Well, I think we need to. The blood moon isn't far off and that means many people will come here. There is a high chance of something going down. What does that even mean? Are you implying I could become a target if my ability gets out? I think you already are one. I froze. Suddenly Dad's words came rushing back to me. Our pack is a hot spot for the attacks. Wait, did Dad have this assumption too? I said, now standing up and staring at Alejandro accusingly. Is that why Dad sent me away? Maybe, maybe not. You're going to have to ask him. Originally, we thought it could be your mother. He said. So, he only let me come to keep me safe. I exclaimed. Irritation and anger were now building within me. Chill out. He did it for your own good. Pups these days. He growled as he made his way to the door. Hey, don't call me a pup. I have the perfect way to annoy Dad off anyway. I'll tell him what I've been doing here, I muttered. He looked at me and for a second I swore I saw amused curiosity there, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Oh yeah? That would be fun to watch. Yeah, I'll tell him we had X. He'll regret the decision for the rest of his life. My amusement died away. No, I would never use that. Not after knowing how Dad still blamed himself for my ankle. Sounds pretty good. Maybe I'll do the honors myself. He said, humorlessly. My smile vanished as he stood, his hand still on the handle. Don't. On that top have you told Jasmine? I asked. No, I have nothing to tell her. I agreed to marry her the day after that night. He said. My heart skipped a beat but I somehow felt a little better. So I would only need to apologize for the kiss. Why do you even care? If anyone, shouldn't I be the one to regret it? He asked. His cold, dark eyes now bore into mine. You don't even feel guilty? Really? Not even for any of your actions? I asked. He looked away, opening the door. No. I don't give the door shut and I lay down on my side with a sigh. Tomorrow I needed to apologize to her, to get it off my chest. The following day I felt much better and took a nice cool shower. Getting dressed in a pair of white torn jeans and a neon pink crop top, I sat down on the bed. I wrapped a bandage around my ankle to help support it before I pulled on some white sneakers and plaited my waist-length hair in a loose braid. Once I put on some matching pink earrings, I finished the look off with some subtle makeup. My hands were almost fully healed and my back was perfect. It seemed Alejandro's saliva worked better than the standard alphas. I now looked at my hands, placing them together as I tried to heal myself once again. I opened my eyes, the dull ache remained and nothing had changed. Guess it won't work. Maybe I just wasn't meant to heal myself? I left my room and bumped straight into Raven. Ow, my nose. Even those plus highest didn't protect it. She said, rubbing her cute button nose. I smiled in amusement. I feel sorry for my poor boobies. I said, giving her a mock glare. She smirked. Oh really? Well girl, we both know someone took really good care of them and seems to adore them, so they get enough love. She said with a gesture towards Alejandro's room. I felt my cheeks heat up slightly. I don't think so. I knew he couldn't keep his eyes off of me, but for her to assume that, was it that obvious? Well, he always seems to have his eyes on you. She whispered as we made our way downstairs. Maybe, So what are you doing today? I asked, desperately wanting to change the topic. Shopping with Rehana and Serena. She said. Sure you don't want to join? I can't. I'm going to go to the hospital to try and help the ones who need it the most. She pouted but nodded in understanding. I wrapped my arms around her. I promise sometime before the blood moon, we'll go out, okay? Deal, I want a whole day. She bargained lightly, wrapping her arms around my waist. I nodded in agreement. I missed our time together. Since coming here, things have been interesting to say the least. You okay? She asked with concern, noticing my rather obvious limp. I smiled. Perfectly. I said, flashing her a smile. I would tell her I sparred but I knew she'd go ballistic. Breakfast smells so good. Raven said, inhaling the yummy food being cooked. Before I could reply, the front door opened to reveal Jasmine standing there in a black leather skirt, a black net top that showed off her underneath, paired with killer heels and red lipstick. The woman sure was hot. I wasn't blind to that. She even reminded me a little of Mum, from the way she dressed and her red hair. Although Mum's was dyed red, this woman was a natural redhead. Apart from their fashion sense and hair, they were nothing else alike. Well, I guess here's my chance to apologize. Our eyes met and she pursed her lips, clearly annoyed off to see me. Can we talk? I asked, letting go of Raven, who gave Jasmine a cold glare before glancing at me and then walking off to the kitchen. About what? She said, crossing her arms. Can we talk outside? I asked. She smirked. Sure. She said, her eyes falling to my ankle as I walked to the door, finding it amusing. I walked past her and stepped outside. She ran her fingers through her hair, a bored look on her face. Make it quick, I'm here to discuss our engagement with Alejandro. That sent a stab of pain through me, but my face remained passive. I shouldn't care. That's nice. The reason I wanted to talk with you was to apologize. If I knew he had someone, I would never have kissed him back. I said quietly. Or at least I would have tried not to. My words seemed to surprise her as she searched my eyes suspiciously. Are you actually apologizing? She asked. Yes. I'm not a homewrecker. I wish you both a happy married and mated life. Congratulations. I said and smiled softly. There is a sense of tranquility when you can just accept something and let go. Even though it hurt inside, seeing that an apology made someone else feel better was enough. I knew it would take me time to get over these feelings I had towards him, the way he made me feel. But he chose Jasmine, that was enough to show what he wanted in life. Wow! Thanks. It really annoyed me off seeing that, but I guess you're not to blame completely. Alpha Alejandro is a catch. As one alpha's daughter to another alpha's daughter. Can we put the past behind us and move on? I asked, not wanting any bad blood. She pursed her lips, then shook her head. Whatever, fine. She said with a nod. Just stay away from my man. I smelled him before I even heard him approach. I didn't want to be here any longer. I will. All the best, I better get inside to Alejandro. Kiera here was just apologizing, Jasmine said. I didn't miss the smugness in her voice, but I was not going to let her pettiness get to me. Couldn't we just behave like two women instead of this childishness coming in the way? What are you doing here? He asked, ignoring her remark. I turned to walk inside when Jasmine laughed. To talk about some stuff with you. And maybe catch up on other stuff. I couldn't help glance at them, as she trailed her hand down his stomach. My heart thrummed painfully in my chest. Just walk away, Kiera, just walk, but I couldn't. I watched as she locked her arms around his neck. He caught her by the waist as she tugged his head down and kissed him on the lips. Alejandro, the moment Jasmine launched herself at me, I caught her by her waist, but my gaze flittered to the beautiful honey-haired princess who stood watching us. The flicker of hurt I saw in those blue-rimmed green eyes of hers tugged at my heart. I hated hurting her, but I kept doing it. It killed me, even more, when she gave a gentle smile and walked off inside. I didn't bother kissing Jasmine back. Her lavender and cinnamon scent didn't appeal to me, and neither did her lips. After kissing Kiera, this felt like a cheap knockoff. I wondered what would feel like with someone else after I've now had a taste of her. Another piece of evidence that the chance of her being my mate was strong. This was all a mess. I mean, I didn't even stop anywhere on my way back for fun like I usually would have. I would never admit it, but I had just wanted to see her. I couldn't even forget how gorgeous she looked last night. I stepped back from Jasmine. Why was the woman even wearing heels? She was tall enough without them, but with those things on she towered over 6 feet. Don't ever kiss me again. Get too clingy and I'll end this, I said dangerously. Come on, baby, we're going to officially become one. You've never said no before, she said, watching me sharply. It's her, isn't it? I looked at her dangerously and she went quiet. She wasn't dumb, it was one of the reasons I tolerated her. I hated dumb women. She looked down and I knew she knew that I'd follow up on my threat. If she thought me agreeing meant my feelings for her had changed, then she was in for a surprise. Kiera has nothing to do with this, and even if she did, I don't answer to anyone, I said coldly. I had heard Kiera apologize. That in itself annoyed me off. I didn't belong to anyone. I hated that she felt she needed to bow down to Jasmine's. I now looked at her coldly, my eyes burning red as I scowled down at her, letting my alpha aura roll off me in waves. I could feel the effect it had on her as she stepped back, fear clear in her eyes. You've agreed to marry a monster. Remember that. Touch me without my permission one more time and I swear I'll kill you, I said dangerously. I meant it, and I could tell from the fear in her eyes she knew I did. She nodded, trying not to tremble in fear as I turned and walked off. There was another I needed to take care of. I made my way through the pack grounds, stopping when I saw 2 pups arguing. They were barely 8 if anything. What's the problem? I asked. They both looked up at me, falling silent. These pups were Omega children, and what irked me was that I could see whose son the one on the left was. As werewolves, we couldn't get a woman pregnant unless we marked her. That was the case for all wolves but Omega women, who could get pregnant regardless. In the past, Omegas were literally slaves and a means to grow the werewolf race. After all, we were killed pretty often. Although this was not the case now, it had been happening in Zidane's pack, Kiera's grandfather's. In mine and all other packs nowadays, unless a woman gave permission, she was not to be used. And I had already told my men, if they were going to FK someone other than their mate, at least put a sock on it. I wasn't sure what rules applied to me. Being a Lycan, I wasn't sure if I needed to mark someone to have a pup, so I always used condoms. A rush of icy realization hit me. I didn't use protection when I linked Kiera. I had never ever gotten so caught up. My stomach twisted and I shook my head. No way. The chances of me being different from standard alphas were slim. And she wasn't an omega, not that I ever linked omegas, they were weaker and I needed a strong woman to keep up with me. I squashed the thought about Kiera and turned my attention back to the pups. These pups would grow up without a father figure in their lives, and if they were discovered, their siblings from their father and his mate might treat them like trash. I knew some of the men who had fathered these pups were mated before they even got an omega pregnant. I usually put these pups through training as warriors, regardless of their rank as omega. With warrior men as their fathers, many were rather strong. Alpha, he wasn't sharing the ball. One of them stated. I raised an eyebrow. Don't be a wuss, if he wasn't sharing, beat out of him and get the ball, I said bluntly. Mama said I shouldn't do that. Doesn't matter what she said. If you want something in life, fight the world for it, I said, frowning at them. Trying to hold back my aura as much as possible. The other boy quickly held the ball out. We will share. Thank you, Alpha. He muttered, looking near tears. I sure scared everyone. I continued on my way, before they did break into tears like little girls. It was a short while later and I had reached the training ground. Alpha, I wasn't expecting you, Carmen said with a smile, wiping away the sweat from her forehead as I walked over to her. She had just finished training a group of warriors. Most were cleared out, although a few remained. Yet, I said, pulling my shirt off and cricking my neck. Yet, when did you get back? I thought you were going to get back later today. I didn't miss her checking me out. I got back last night. Right about the time your match ended. I said coldly, watching the color fade from her face. I can explain. Whatever she said. Who, Kiera? She said nothing, nothing. But I'm not stupid. So, since you enjoy sparring, let's spar. My eyes flashed and I was in front of her in a flash, grabbing her neck. I smashed her into the ground, hearing the sickening crunch of her skull. Alpha! Someone shouted. Stay away, I growled and they all stopped. I saw a few hesitate but my alpha command was enough to stop them. If anyone dares to contact Darien, I will have their heads ripped from their shoulders. They nodded, stinking of fear and sweat as they slowly began backing away. They were unsure of what to do as they looked at Carmen, who was clutching her head. Get up! I hissed, now ignoring them. She tried getting to her feet but I didn't have the patience. I grabbed her by her neck, lifting her off the ground and dropping her to her feet roughly. Come at me! I commanded. Even if she wanted, she couldn't refuse me. She raised her arms in defense before she ran at me, aiming a kick. I knocked it aside and punched her straight across the jaw. Kiera's injuries flashed through my mind, remembering how she had made her way home. The way she had said to not do anything about it. Why was she so kind to like this? I clenched my jaw, trying not to finish her in go. If anyone tried to hurt Kiera, they were not going to get away with it. Alpha, she'll die. Someone dared protest, an alpha-blooded warrior who had joined my ranks. My eyes blazed and I glanced at the man who had spoken. He was next. I didn't stop as I continued to fight Carmen, my anger was out of my control. All I could see was the claw marks on Kiera's back and the swelling bruise that had been on her ankle, one I had noticed only when I had gone to her room after talking to Indigo. My anger only grew, as I smashed Carmen into the ground once again. I grabbed her neck, ready to put an end to it. I looked into her unrecognizable face. Was this all my warriors could do? Not even able to last against me? Useless trash. I didn't care that she had been one of my first warriors or pack members. I didn't care that she had been ready to follow me when I first set up my rule. All I cared about was what she had done to Kiera. It had taken my all not to find her last night. I looked into her face, her eyes barely open. Blood seeping out of her nose and mouth. I would say, next time watch who you mess with, but there won't be a next time. Don't forget to say hi to Selene for me. I mocked, ready to snap her neck when I felt a cool aura wrap around me, accompanied by the one voice that broke me out of my blinding fit of rage. Stop! Kiera, I had heard a few warriors panicking that the Alpha had snapped in the training grounds and I was curious what had happened. I hurried over to see what they meant. After all, Raven's description of his anger and seeing Rayhan's state worried me. As I got closer, a feeling of foreboding filled me and my wolf was screaming at me to run. Calm down, girl, I said in my head as I broke into a run, trying my best not to let the pain in my ankle get to me. I reached the training grounds. I saw the blood that covered Alejandro's hands. It wasn't his. It took me a split second to realize the situation. Alejandro was ready to kill Carmen. Because of me. Don't forget to say hi to Selene form. Alejandro's words and the darkness that loomed around him sent me into a state of panic. He couldn't do this. Stop! I shouted, rushing over towards them. I stumbled slightly before I lunged myself at the dangerous Alpha, knocking him away from Carmen. I heard some gasps but I didn't care. His back hit the ground with a thud and his hands went to my thighs as he caught me before I went tumbling to the ground. My heart skipped a beat his move because I was about to kiss the floor if he hadn't. I looked at him, feeling his anger calming slightly. His eyes returned to their usually dark ones and I let out a soft sigh. He glared at me but I could sense his anger dissipating. I was about to say something when his eyes darkened and I realized with a rush of heat filling me that I was straddling him, sitting right on a certain something. I quickly jumped off him, reality hitting me as I turned to Carmen's body. Her life was depleting too fast. I didn't know where to start. Don't! Alejandro said coldly, breaking me out of my worry-filled mind. I'm not going to leave her like this. I whispered. Everyone leave. He hissed and the few warriors who had remained quickly left. You need to keep your ability a secret. What? And not help anyone? I asked as I closed my eyes, trying to heal her. She couldn't die, not like this. I heard a small moan and opened my eyes to see her eyes flutter. Just then, Alejandro grabbed me by the waist and pulled me up. Those dreaded tingles, rushing through me once more. You've done enough. Stop. He said coldly. Don't touch me. I shouted. I'd had enough. I had told him it was between Carmen and me. I now glared at him. I hate how you think you can tell me what to do. I told you it was between us. She broke the rules of a fair match. I'm not stupid. He growled. I know she did. But I can handle my own battles. I don't need you to fight for me. Did I ask you for justice? No. I didn't. I shouted, my voice breaking from how loud I was screaming. Using a silver weapon. Using claws and hitting your foot whilst you're on my grounds will not be tolerated. He growled like you care. I spat resentfully, turning away only for him to grab my arm and swing me back towards him. I gasped as I stumbled, hitting his bare chest. My lips brushed his chest, and I felt his heart race. The move made my own stomach go all crazy. I looked up at him curiously as I tried to move back. He confused me. His actions and his physical reaction towards me conflicted with one another. I frowned, pushing the thoughts away. I didn't want to hear anything from him. Let go of me. I said dangerously. Listen to me. He replied quietly. A frown on his face. You need to stop using your abilities, so I said let go. I screamed, my eyes flashing. My wolf was getting upset with this stupid argument. 1, 2, 3. I raised my free hand and slapped him across the face. Hard. His eyes widened in surprise and so did mine as I stared at him in shock. I just slapped the king. Oh, goddess! His hold had slackened and I pulled free. I turned to Carmen. She was stable, I could tell from her steady breathing. Thank you, Selene. I didn't look back at Alejandro, turning and hurrying away. My heart was pounding, but I was more shocked that he didn't snap my neck right there. I looked down at myself. Everywhere he had touched me, he had covered me in blood. I sighed, well, I guess I'll put on a doctor's coat once I get to the hospital. I had just about wiped myself clean, although my jeans still had a few marks, and had put on my coat when a nurse popped her head in. Miss, Dr. Callum wants you in his office. On the ground floor, take the lift. It is at the bottom left. Ask someone if you need to. Okay. Thank you. I said, sighing as I made my way out after tucking my phone into my pocket and putting my keycard around my neck. I smiled slightly as I walked down the halls. There was a sense of calmness here. I reached the office and after knocking, was told to enter. Instantly, the deep, seductive scent of Alejandro reached my nose. My heart was going crazy. I had slapped him. Oh goddess, I'm surprised he didn't kill me on the spot, but why had he followed me here? I glanced at him to see he had a shirt on again and the smell of blood was gone. From his wet hair and the scent of body wash, it was clear he had just showered. He stood there looking drop-dead gorgeous, leaning against the wall, a cigarette in his hand and his phone in his other. Now I feel annoyed. He got me all dirty and then cleaned himself up. Our eyes met and I quickly looked away. What was he doing smoking in here? It was a hospital. You called for me, I said, turning my attention to Callum. We did. Close the door, Callum said. It's regarding your healing. Worry filled me. Was he going to stop me from healing now? Oh no. Was this how he was going to get revenge? Alejandro didn't bother saying anything, his eyes on the doctor's face. I understand you are really excited to help and of course I would love to have you use your abilities, but the king is right. You need to keep it hidden. Who cares? I don't need protection but those patients need to live. And I have the means to help, protested angrily. How could they do this? Kiera. I froze at that voice. Alejandro turned his phone around to reveal Dad's frowning face. My stomach dropped. He even had Dad on his side too. Dad, listen to me, no Kiera. You listen. First of all, the fact you didn't bother to tell us? Seriously, we had to hear it from Alejandro. Dad said, looking dangerous. I stayed quiet, clenching my jaw. Trying to calm myself down before speaking. Dad, you sent me here to allow me to help heal. And that needs to be taken down a few notches. Angel, you can't display your powers openly. You're the target and have been for years. You need to be careful, if not for yourself, then for me and your mother. So even here you're shackling me down? I asked. I knew Alejandro was watching me, the burning intensity of his gaze locked on me. I'm not. I'm just saying, don't use your abilities. But there are people dying. I snapped. And I don't want you dead. Dad growled. What? I gritted my teeth. I wasn't going to win. Then at least let me heal those injured really badly, bit by bit, so everyone thinks it's the herbs that are working. You have got to let me do this. These powers aren't for me to just sit idle. Besides, someone's been after me for ages, right? Dad frowned. Couldn't you have kept your mouth shut, Alejandro? He asked Alejandro. I don't really come with a filter, and I don't sugarcoat. He said, taking a long drag on his cigarette. I gave him a dirty look, one Dad saw. Kiera. I hope you're behaving. He growled. I am. I said icily, clenching my fist. I pray to Selena I find my mate this blood moon, so I can finally leave with him and not feel so suffocated. The chances are he would be from a neighboring pack, so you won't go that far. He would also want to keep you as safe as I do, if not more. Kiera, I love you and that's why I'm saying this. Dad said, just as I saw Mom's creamy-colored arms wrap around his neck whilst she kissed his ear. Kiera's idea sounds fair though. As long as she keeps her powers on the low, I don't see the harm in just healing them a little here and there. Mom said. See, told you Mom is the coolest, I told my wolf. So, how's your stay been so far? Mom asked. Good. I said. Have you got a hang of your abilities? Mom asked with a small smile. I think so, I mean, I healed 3 people somewhat. I said. Have you tried to heal? Dad trailed off and I felt a small ache in my chest. I knew what he meant and I knew if I was able to, he'd feel better about my ankle. Since he lived with the guilt of what happened. Yeah, I did, it doesn't work on me. I said, smiling cheerfully despite the sadness that I felt. The room fell silent and I dared not look away from the screen, not wanting to see what expression was on Alejandro's and Dr. Callum's faces. Mom smiled gently but she wasn't able to hide the sadness in her eyes. Dad hid his emotions better but I knew they both had their hopes up and that hurt. Really hurt. Did they really see me as something that needed fixing? Even though deep down, I knew that wasn't the case, my emotions had taken control. Well, if that's all, I'll go. I won't use my abilities openly. I said, turning and leaving the office. For the first time in my life, I felt like a huge disappointment to my parents. Alejandro, I had messaged Elijah last night about her ability and he had replied not long ago. It seems like he had a late night. He had called me demanding answers not long after I got that shocking slap. It made sense to keep it on the low, I actually agreed with him. I won't admit it, but I didn't want her hurt. At the same time, I knew she was the type of person who would hate to ever be tied down. Even when she had slapped me, I had been beyond shocked. If I had doubts, then they were even slimmer now. I was sure she was my mate. No one would dare to slap me and walk off like that, and I didn't get as annoyed off as I would have expected. The fact that she stood up to me showed me she wasn't scared of me, or not that much anyway. I wasn't sure if I should be happy about this or annoyed. Now, as she cast that fake smile at her parents before she left, hurt. I hated how every foreign feeling I was feeling right now was all thanks to her. She made me feel stuff I don't want to feel but I couldn't hate her for it. In fact, the urge to go to her overcame me. I turned the phone back towards me and looked at the couple. I frowned as my gaze fell to Scarlett's hair. Red hair, I was sick of seeing it. I frowned and she C0CKED a brow. Care to share why you're so goddess moody? When is he ever not? Elijah's reply came. I cut the call. How did they make a hot goddess like Kiera? Okay, I know how they made her, and I did not want to think of that. I frowned. Where was my mind going? I blamed Kiera. The girl was messing with my head. Give all those who know about her so far a warning not to mention this to anyone. I don't want this out. Send them to my office in an hour. I'd rather tell them in person. I said coldly. Callum nodded. I have already told them, but I will warn them again. I will pass on the message as well, Alpha. He said, before I left the room. I wanted to find her, to see if she was okay. I hesitated. Actually, I had a good excuse to see her. She slapped me. Yeah, I'll use that for this, but really? The fact she slapped me was still a lot to get my head around. No one has ever slapped me. The weirdest thing was it was over Carmen, a woman who had hurt her, yet she still healed her and stood up against me for her. This was irritating. I didn't get this. I let her scent lead me until I found myself on the second floor. This was where the worst of the patients were kept. I frowned as I looked through the glass at my men. They were my men, who had fought and risked their own lives for the rest. I wondered how they did it, knowing they had loved ones. Was it a strength or weakness to love at the same time their lives were constantly being put at risk? Something Darien said years ago returned to me. I live every day as if it's my last, love my mate and cherish my family each second of every day, and I'll continue to do so until the day I die. So, when that time comes, I have no regrets. I didn't get it at the time, but now. My eyes spotted Kiera in one of the rooms. I leaned against the wall, looking through the glass as Julio and Brian hovered over her, in case the patient got out of hand. I smirked slightly when she waved them back, giving them that glare I was so used to seeing, before placing some herbal balm over the large gashes of my warrior. I saw the slight aura of her power and frowned. She couldn't heal herself. Imagine if she were by my side, if I ever accidentally hurt her. There wouldn't be any miraculous healing. I sighed deeply. Why was I even picturing her by my side? Jasmine was a strong woman, end of story. I didn't need a woman to come into my personal space 24/7. If say Kiera and I happened, I wouldn't want to leave her or do anything else day in and day out. I stepped back, realizing whether I liked it or not, I was falling for her deep, or I already had. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to calm my racing heart as I watched her through the glass. I saw the glimmer of sadness in her eyes despite the smile on her lips as she subtly healed the warrior whilst she applied the bandages. She looked back at him before she disposed of the gloves she had worn and came towards the door. She stopped when she saw me, as the two men lowered their heads respectfully. Alpha. Julio said quietly. May I help you, Alpha? She asked quietly. Yeah, we need to talk. I said, frowning. About? She asked, walking off. I was the king, not her. I narrowed my eyes and grabbed her wrist, turning and dragging her down the hall. Let go of me. Or do you want a repeat of earlier? She hissed, trying to keep her voice down. I opened the small storeroom door and pushed her inside, before I stepped inside myself and closed it behind me. Switching the light on, it was tight in here. The room barely had space for one person, let alone two. I felt her heart race at the close proximity. She stepped back, leaving a small gap between us. Not that this tight place allowed much space. What do you want to talk about? She said coldly, that slap. I said. Her heart thudded and I smirked dangerously. What did you think? That you can slap a king and get away with it? I asked, enjoying this. Yeah, maybe this was nowhere near comforting her the right way, but I didn't do like that, and this was actually quite fun. You were in the wrong, she stated, now glaring up at me with those tantalizing eyes of hers. Oh yeah? Who do you think you are to tell me if I'm right or wrong? I wasn't wrong. She disrespected you, by cheating, and that called for a punishment. I growled. Why do you care? She asked softly. Our eyes met and I had no answer. Like I said, I won't tolerate anything out of line from warriors, I said coldly. Her closeness was with me and that look of pure curiosity was tempting me to push her up against the wall right here. Still, it was between us. Her voice was breathless and I knew it was affecting her too. So how will you make it up to me? I asked huskily. I stepped closer, backing her against the shelves. I kept breaking every rule or decision I was making. She with my head more than I could ever put into words. Alpha Alejandro, I said, now looking down at her as she placed her hands on my chest to stop me from advancing. Her eyes widened in shock and I saw with pure satisfaction the deep blush that now coated her cheeks. She was perfect. I need to get out there, she said, tearing her gaze from me. What's wrong? Getting too much in here? I asked, now letting my hands skim over her hips before I gripped them firmly. I really wanted to tear that stupid coat off her. I pulled her against me, hearing her whimper and releasing the sweet smell of her arousal along with it. My eyes darkened and the desire to consume her grew. I leant down as her chest rose and fell heavily. Our noses brushed, our breathing mingled and I heard her breath hitch. The need and longing for her was consuming me, but before I could connect our lips she moved back slightly, staring up at me pleadingly, her eyes now holding raw hurt. Please don't. She whispered in a voice that sounded so vulnerable it tore me up inside. Kiera, please don't. I pleaded. This hurt. He didn't realize what he was doing to me. Did he just think I was okay with casual acts? Yes, I did engage with Damon like that, but that was so different from what I felt for Alejandro. The attraction towards him often felt like it would consume me completely. The way his hands gripped my hips, the way his scent made me dizzy in a pleasant way, and the ache in my core, begging to be satisfied by him. He paused, to my surprise, searching my eyes. I was near tears and I hated feeling like this. Don't make me fall for you, when I am nothing to you. I whispered. I didn't know why I said it. For him to just mock me? This was what he wanted, right? I didn't really know. I wasn't blind to the fact that he was different towards me, but it wasn't enough to give in when he was engaged to Jasmine. I don't even know what I wanted from him. He let go of me and I could hear his heart racing. The fact that he listened. And didn't just force himself. Thank you. I whispered. I squeezed past him, closing my eyes when I brushed against him completely to get out. Was he really letting me go? I paused, looking back at him. His face was unreadable, and for once, he was silent. I didn't know what to make of it. My heart was pounding as I placed my hand on his cheek, the same place I had slapped him, feeling the slight prickle of his stubble and the definition of his refined jaw beneath my fingertips. Feeling him tense under my touch. I shouldn't have slapped you, I'm sorry. I said quietly. I hoped this was the last of our odd run-ins. I couldn't keep doing this. I was about to open the door when suddenly his strong arms wrapped around me from behind. My eyes widened as gasped in surprise. My heart was thumping. Why did his hold feel so perfect? I closed my eyes, wishing I could just stay here, but I knew I couldn't. He ran his hands down my arms softly, leaving a trail of tingles in his wake, burying his nose in my neck and inhaling me deeply. I was beyond confused, unable to comprehend what this was. When had the Lycan king ever shown such gentleness? My eyes blurred with tears at the foreign pain that was building in my chest. Why did this feel like a goodbye? His lips met the corner of my neck so softly I wondered if I imagined it. Pleasure coursed through me, laced with the pain that this was not meant to be. I gasped as the first of my tears spilled down my cheeks. His arms loosened around me and he turned me in his arms. He cupped my face just how he had last night and brushed my tears away with his thumbs. I couldn't read those dark onyx eyes of his. I won't bother you again. I forget that not everyone's a heartless monster like me, he said quietly, making me shake my head. He wasn't a monster, and he wasn't heartless. I wish I could say something, but I couldn't tell him when I was trying to hold my tears back. There was so much more to him, just waiting to be discovered. I won't bother you from here on out. You're reckless, beautiful, and strong. More than that. You're perfect the way you are. Always remember that. He whispered. My heart was pounding, and if I was scared to fall for him, then it was too late. He had already made a space in my heart for himself. I'd never forget those words, their sincerity. Saying I was perfect just the way I am. That part hit me the hardest. One thing about Alejandro was that he said it as it is. He leant down and placed a soft kiss on my forehead, wiping away a few more tears, before he let go of me and opened the door behind me. I closed my eyes. Why did this feel like the end? Something inside me was screaming at me to stop him, to tell him to give me a chance. But what would that do? He brushed past me, his dark eyes meeting mine one final time before he walked out. My eyes didn't leave his broad back, with his muscular arms and narrow waist. He walked with power and you could see that he was the ultimate alpha, but he was more than the heartless Lycan king everyone made him out to be. I knew that much. He protected the werewolf race. If he didn't care, he could have just lived a life of luxury and chilled the king, but he didn't. He chose to protect those weaker than him. Did everyone forget that when they called him ruthless and cold-hearted? He didn't turn back and I remained rooted in my place. The Lycan king and I were two very different people. Somehow, we had a connection, but there was nothing more between us. There couldn't be. We were worlds apart. I turned away, brushing my tears from my cheeks. I needed to be strong. It was for the best. Deep down, I still couldn't make sense of Alejandro's actions, but I wasn't going to delve into them. I had patience to heal. The day had passed by in a blur. I went to all the injured, some whilst they slept, others were awake. Secretly healing them a little. I could feel it catching up on me, but I made sure not to overexert myself or I'd never hear the end of it. I even saw Carmen in one of the beds. The doctors said she was stable and that was a relief to hear. I didn't like her, but that did not mean she deserved death. Valentin had also been discharged, as he was more worried about his mate. I was a little gutted as I wanted to see him, but I was just so happy he was okay and that he was with his mate. The entire pack seemed to know about what had happened with Carmen, yet no one dared talk about it. The fear they felt of their king was palpable and his rule was absolute. Although the day had been progressive, my mind was consumed by the moment I had with Alejandro earlier. The way he had held me, spoke to me and kissed me. I had returned to the mansion and couldn't even smell him around. It looked like he hadn't come home today. I had showered and taken a nap before I had been awoken by Raven to say that we were going to go see Auntie Indy. I was excited about that and hoped it would lift my mood too. Now dressed in a pretty blue skater dress, I made my way with Raven to her apartment. Are you sure she said to come? I asked curiously. Yes, she texted in the group chat. Oops, I had it on silent. I said guiltily. We reached the block of apartments and made our way up the steps to Auntie Indy's door. The door was opened before we could even knock, by a very big man. He had a small beard, his dirty blonde hair pulled up in a high ponytail. His piercing brown eyes looked us both over before he pushed past and walked off. I felt something was off. That strange feeling that I often got overcame me. I didn't get a good feeling from him. Girls? Auntie Indy said, bringing me out of my thoughts, as she pulled us both into a tight hug. Ouchie! Raven exclaimed, hugging us tightly. Shouldn't I be the one saying ouchie? I said. I mean, you both are crushing me. Well, it's not our fault that you have extra fat, Auntie Indy teased. I looked at her amused. Unlike Mom, she was leaner, with defined abs and slightly tanned skin. Her black pixie cut suited her well and she had several piercings in her ears, as well as in her nose and eyebrow. I smiled. This was Raven's role model growing up. So, get inside. We have a lot to catch up on. She said. Yes, we do. When did you get back? Raven asked, as we stepped into the apartment that was decorated in the modern interior that I was beginning to get accustomed to here. This apartment had a very homely touch, with a deep terracotta that was incorporated in ornaments, cushions and other homely touches. The delicious smell of chicken and vegetables baking in the oven from the kitchen area was ever so pleasant and I realized I had missed lunch. Last night actually. Auntie Indy replied. I didn't say that I had heard her talking to Alejandro, but I was curious as to why he seemed to have shown a different side of himself towards her. Oh nice, SO000 what's the latest? Raven questioned, dropping onto the black leather sofa. Well, life's an adventure, getting to see different cities and towns. Auntie Indigo said. Gosh, when is the last time we actually saw you? I asked sitting down. I think it's been over 6 months. Auntie Indy said, giving us a small smile. I smiled back. I wish you could have visited more. Raven said. I don't think Scarlett or Angela miss me much. She laughed. They do, Mom may not say it, but you are her little sister. I said with a small smile. I saw her smile falter slightly and I wondered what that was about. So enough about me. The food will be done soon, but before that, tell me how's the stay in the Night Walker's pack going, she asked, standing up. She went over to the fridge and took out 3 cans of Coca-Cola. She tossed one to each of us and I caught mine, tapping the top with my nail several times before opening it, a trick Dad taught me years ago. I smiled softly, feeling a twinge in my chest. I had seen Mom's missed calls and Dad's messages, but I was really bad with my phone. I promised myself I'd call them tonight. The stay is going kinda okay, Raven said, glancing at me. Really? Serena told me that Alpha Al attacked Rayhan, Auntie Indy said sharply. Yeah, I mean, apart from that stuff it's been good. Raven said smoothly, opening her can and talking a big gulp. It's been great, I mean for me, being able to help at the hospital is amazing. I said, before I went on to talk to her about my abilities, telling her I had to keep it secret. Once I was done, we had finished carrying the food to the coffee table and all sat down to eat. So, Auntie Indy, tell us, do you know Jasmine? The king's fiancée? Raven asked. For some reason, the smile that appeared on Auntie Indy's face made my stomach sink. I'm so glad he finally accepted her, them two go really well, she said. Honestly, he took way too long to accept her. You think so? Raven asked, glancing at me. It was clear she wasn't expecting this answer. Definitely, I don't think there's anyone else more suited for our king. Kiera, those words felt bitter to digest, but I didn't respond as I put some food on my plate. Jasmine and Alpha Al have had an on-off relationship, if you could call it that. Anyway, he tolerates her. She knows how to run a pack and she's smart, plus she's actually pretty strong. Alpha Al is pretty closed up and won't really let anyone close to him. Jasmine's able to tolerate him, and although he can be hateful, she's strong enough to stand by his side. Auntie Indy continued. Why not choose a she-wolf from his own pack? Raven asked curiously. Auntie Indy smirked. Although the king's got a reputation as an uncaring, dangerous bad boy, he has rules. He doesn't sleep with any woman from his own pack. Not even Omegas. That surprised me. I looked up at her, shocked. What? Why? I asked. He doesn't think it's professional, and I think it makes sense, as this way there won't be any cat fights between the females. Most of the women would love to sleep with him. Heck, even crushed on him back in the day. Auntie Indy said, pulling a face. But he treats his pack equally and doesn't cross the line between business and pleasure. I scoffed. Yeah, right. I said, freezing when Raven raised an eyebrow at me, smirking. Auntie Indy looked confused. What does that mean? Well, I'm sure he gets around, I stated. Well, I know Scarlet said he with Liana back when he visited the Blood Moon pack recently. Auntie Indy chuckled. My stomach sank a little more. So, he had with someone after he had teased me. I don't know why that hurt, it just did. But then again, I couldn't be that much of a hypocrite, I had with Damon that night too. Liana? Really? Wow, Raven said, before trailing off. Well, she is gorgeous. Auntie Indy said. I guess it's good that Jasmine seems strong enough to deal with him. I doubt he'll correct his ways though. So, what does he do if he doesn't have with his own pack members? He's out often enough, and sometimes he'll have some women come over for a night or so. She replied with a shrug. Why are you so curious? Oh, no real reason. I mean, we live there and I wouldn't want some random woman brought into the house, you know. Raven said, smoothly. I could tell she wanted to bury the topic now. Oh, he rarely brings women to his mansion. I think the only woman who he's had in that house is probably Jasmine. He has a second place. I drank my Coke, wishing it was alcohol or something to help with the growing pain I was feeling inside. So, for all I knew, he had probably slept with several women since I've been here. Right? The thought that maybe he did feel something for me, depleted fast. I guess it was better that I didn't delve on it and he'd just stay away from me, and I him. It was much later, and we were chatting and laughing. It had been so much fun to just unwind and catch up. I even felt better. Mom video called for a bit and I was glad she was her normal self, but as the time passed I could tell Auntie Indy kept looking at the time and felt a bit uneasy. She reached over for a bottle of water from the table, her top sliding up, and I saw a large bruise on her hip. What happened there? I asked in concern. Reaching over, she tensed but relaxed when I touched it slowly. Oh, on the way back, rogues, she said, pulling a face. It must have been a big hit if it is still not healed, Raven said sympathetically. I took a deep breath and focused on wanting to heal it. This time I noticed the very gentle coolness and I opened my eyes just as the bruise faded away. Auntie Indy whistled. Wow! Thanks, Kia, she said, impressed, and gave me a tight hug with a kiss on the forehead. I smiled and wrapped my arms around her. I suddenly missed Mom a lot. When is Fred returning? Raven asked. I wouldn't mind getting to know your broody mate a little. Oh, I'm not sure. I'm a little tired. Shall we call it a night? Auntie Indy suggested, returning to looking a little uncomfortable. I could sense the unease rolling off her, underlined with maybe even a bit of fear. I frowned. You okay, Auntie? I asked, concerned. Yeah, I just need to sleep. I have an early start tomorrow. I'll see you girls tomorrow. I'll come down, she said. Raven didn't say anything, but I knew she had caught on to Auntie's rush to get us out of there too. That sounds great, I said as I and Raven got up to leave. Just then, the front door opened, and in walked Auntie's mate. A frown on his face, the smell of alcohol laced with his own, and I felt my stomach sink when I could smell something else off him and a woman. It was faint, but I noticed his clothes were also changed. I glanced at Auntie Indy, who looked at me, a glint of sadness and embarrassment in her eyes before she looked away. You lot are still here, he said moodily. Yes. Do you want to join us? Raven asked. I knew Raven couldn't smell it because her wolf hadn't awoken, so her senses weren't so strong. Not to mention, I was of alpha blood and my sense of smell was naturally stronger. They were just leaving, Auntie Indy said, walking over to him. I watched as she wrapped her arms around him and I felt my heart break. She loved him and he was abusing that. Anger ignited within me as I clenched my jaw. Stay calm and leave, Kiera. Don't do anything reckless. It took every ounce of my self-restraint to not react. I walked past them, my fists clenched, giving it my all not to lunge at him for hurting and using my auntie like this. Is this what mates were capable of? All I had seen was mates loving each other, like mom and dad, granddad, and grandma. I guess I had heard of mom's biological dad abusing grandma. But it was rare, right? How could auntie possibly deal with this? I stormed out the door with Raven hurrying to keep up with me. Whoa girl, chill. Let's just go home, I said coldly. Kia. What happened? Forget it, I said, as she took my hand and led me down the steps. We reached the bottom but my fury was only growing. Kia. Stop, don't tell me to stop, I snapped. My entire body felt like I was on fire. The anger I felt inside was screaming to get out. Kia, breathe, Raven said tersely as she let go of me. I couldn't. All I could feel was resentment towards Frederick and how he was treating Auntie. Kia. You're on fire. I looked at her, frowning as I realized I could see her. A purple light seemed to be illuminating the entire area. It was then that I realized it was coming from none other than me. I raised my hands to see the purple flame-like aura surrounding my entire body, visible to the eye. Alejandro, I had locked myself in my office all day, drinking bottle after bottle. I don't even know how many cigarettes I have consumed. Her innocent pleas to stop hurting her destroyed me. I should never have used her. I was strong enough to protect her, right? But that would only make sense if there was someone to protect her from me. I was a monster, she was someone with so much concern and love that it sure made up for my lack of it. I often snapped, and if I ever hurt her, she couldn't even heal herself. Even if she could, I didn't want to hurt her. Yet, I was already doing that without trying. I stared at the ceiling, my feet crossed on my desk as I leaned back in my seat, feeling like a train wreck inside. I knew what I needed to do. Keep myself so busy that I didn't have time to think about her. It was now dark outside. I had just sat here in the dark, not even bothering to move, all day. A knock on the door brought me out of my reverie and Darien entered. Coughing as he waved his hand, shutting the door behind him. What? Are you trying to kill yourself in here? He said, going over to the windows and opening one. I raised an eyebrow. If I wanted to die, there's plenty of better ways to go. I shot back, glaring at him. I had to admit it was a smoke fest in here. What is it? He asked, crossing his arms as he stayed near the window. What do you mean, what is it? I said, playing dumb. I didn't want to talk to him. What's bothering you, Alejandro? No bothering me. You're not a shrink, so stop trying to pry. Since you're getting the mating ceremony ball organized and up and running. I said. Already on it. He said, with a nod. Serena's managing it. Invite all the alphas to it. 2 days after the ball will be my official engagement to Jasmine, I said. My stomach twisted at the very thought, but it was for the best. You sure, Alejandro? He asked me. I hated how he tried to get in my head. I mean, are you sure she's the right one? What? You want me to take Kiera? I mocked coldly. Well, I didn't mention names. But yes. She is an alpha's daughter, 2 alphas at that. She's actually the most ideal, plus the pack have nothing but praise to say about her. Well, apart from some of them crushing on her like crazy. I glared at him, my anger rising at the thought, but I said nothing, not wanting him to get even more reasons to do my head in. My point is, she's a far greater option than Jasmine. Yes, she's young and probably has a mate out there, but if you keep her away from all male wolves on a BL00D moon, it's all good, he trailed off, feeling a bit guilty about his words. I smirked coldly. Evil. Well, it's an idea. He grumbled. If I tell Serena you said that, I smirked coldly and he looked a little panicked. Please don't. You know, Even she really likes Kiera. She's a natural and the light that she brings, she's special Alejandro. I hated the fact he was telling me what I already knew. She was special. And I'm sure she was made for me. I could accept it. No. I couldn't. I'd only hurt her. I needed to stop thinking of like that. Can you imagine me asking Elijah for his daughter? I remarked with a sadistic smirk. I'd do that just to annoy him off. You know, you two really need to work on your egos. Darien grumbled. Well, if your mind is made up, I better get to work. Jasmine wanted a big do, but I guess with the shorter time it will be tough. If we get everyone to help, make sure security, training, and everyone's jobs are not affected. I don't want going down because we got relaxed over some preparations. Got it. Are you sure, Alejandro? I growled dangerously, my eyes flashing red. Ask me one more time and I'll snap your head off, I said. He sighed. Okay, but you know when you regret this decision. Then I'll be the first to say I told you so. Funny, you've changed your tune so quick. You were one of the ones to tell me to accept Jasmine as my mate for ages now. I said icily. Yeah, until someone who seems to have a bond with you showed up. I don't know if it's possible, but there's something different between the two of you and I wish you would just embrace it. He said. Anyway, I'll make sure the preps are done. I didn't reply as he was about to turn to leave, when he suddenly stopped at the sight of the dazzling purple glow from outside. What the? He began. I was up in a flash as I came to the window to see what it was. From between the flats, I could see it filling the area. I pushed the window open, jumping out, landing on the ground 40 feet below as Darien shifted in midair and we both ran towards the glow, reaching it in record time. I stopped when I saw Kiera standing there, her entire body wrapped in a purple aura that was powerful. For a second, I wondered if something had happened to her, but I recognized that aura. Despite it being 100 times more impressive, it was hers. Gone was the cool, faint aura she had when she healed. Standing before me was the epitome of breathtaking power and beauty. In 2 words, a goddess. For a moment I was distracted by her sheer aura and power, but the sudden thought that this display of power could attract enemies brought me back to the present. What confused me was how had she kept this much power hidden. Kiera, I called her quietly. She and Raven both turned, they looked alarmed but Kiera looked annoyed. It was the only way I could describe those astonishing purple orbs of hers and the gaze that was directed right at me. How could you? She said. I raised an eyebrow. What had I done? I didn't even know. Alpha, that aura needs to be kept hidden or her secret won't stay secret for long. Being able to see an aura isn't normal. Darien said. Yeah, I know that. I glared at him for a second. Get the midget home, I'll deal with Kiera. I said coldly. Darien nodded. Don't you dare come near me. Kiera growled as I stepped closer. Too bad, I don't take orders from no one, I said, my eyes flashing red. I let my own aura out, seeing Raven back away at the sheer force. Darien nudged her with his snout before pulling her away. Don't hurt her, she shouted to me. I didn't bother replying. The darkness of my aura seemed to press against Kiara's, but for the first time in my life, I felt like someone had just been granted equal power. Not once did her power falter or fade as my aura enveloped the area. Her blazing eyes didn't leave mine. I didn't know why she was angry, but the accusatory gaze in her eyes stung a little. But when did I become a wuss? Well, if that wasn't going to work, I guess we'll go with option 2. Sorry beautiful, but this is going to hurt a little. In a flash, I was in front of Kiara. Before she could even react, I hit her pressure point in her neck hard, knocking her unconscious. I caught her in my arms as her body became limp, feeling a slice of guilt at the bruise that my fingers had left on her otherwise flawless neck. The urge to kiss her there filled me, but I looked away. I was about to scoop her up bridal style when I heard the distant, unearthly growl of a Wendigo. Kiara had just sent out a lighthouse signal giving away her location. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.